My stepdad threw me out when I turned 16. Now that I'm successful, he claims he raised me. If you're just tuning in, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an update on this story. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. The smell of vanilla cake wafted through the cramped apartment, but 16-year-old shoulders tensed at the sound of heavy footsteps approaching the kitchen. She'd been up since dawn, cleaning every surface until it gleamed, hoping today would be different. The birthday girl pressed her back against the counter, watching her mother nervously adjust the single candle on the store-bought cake. "Oscar is in one of his moods," her mother whispered, glancing toward the hallway where the sound of a belt buckle jingling grew louder. The girl, Clara, felt her stomach drop. She'd learned to read the warning signs. The way her stepfather's jaw clenched when he came home from the factory, how his eyes narrowed when he looked at her, the deliberate way he'd ignore her presence at dinner. For 3 years since her mother remarried, she'd walked on eggshells in what was supposed to be her home. Oscar appeared in the doorway, his work clothes still reeking of motor oil and disappointment. His gaze swept over the modest celebration with obvious disgust. "What's all this mess?" "It's Clara's birthday," her mother said quietly, her voice barely audible. "Birthday?" He spat the word like it tasted bitter. 16 years of taking up space, eating our food, using our electricity. His cold stare fixed on Clara, who felt her heart hammering against her ribs. "Old enough to know better, old enough to contribute, but all you do is take." The candle flickered in the sudden silence, casting dancing shadows across faces frozen in anticipation. Clara's mother reached for her daughter's hand, but something in Oscar's expression made her pull back. The birthday girl realized with growing dread that this wasn't going to be just another argument. Oscar stepped closer to the kitchen table, his massive frame casting a shadow over the small cake. The sweet smell of vanilla now seemed sickening in the thick tension that filled the room. Clara watched her mother's hands tremble as she gripped the edge of the counter, knuckles white with fear. 16, Oscar repeated, rolling the number around in his mouth like a curse. "You know what that means, don't you?" His question hung in the air like a blade waiting to fall. Clara's throat felt dry as sandpaper. "No, sir," she managed to whisper. "It means you're not my responsibility anymore." The words hit like physical blows. "It means you can make your own way in this world instead of bleeding us dry." Her mother finally found her voice, though it shook with desperation. "Oscar, please, she's still in school. She's got 1 more year." "School?" He laughed, a harsh sound that made both women flinch. "What's school ever done for people like us? I've been working since I was 14 and I turned out just fine." His eyes burned with a resentment that had been building for years. "Unlike some people, I know the value of hard work." Clara felt tears stinging her eyes but refused to let them fall. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction. "I work hard in school. My grades." "Your grades don't pay rent." Oscar slammed his palm on the table, making the cake jump. The single candle toppled over, wax splattering across the frosting. "Your grades don't put food on this table or keep the lights on." The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone in the room. Clara stared at the ruined cake, her birthday wish dying before it could even be made. Something cold and final settled in her stomach as she met her stepfather's gaze. The apartment felt smaller with each passing second, the walls seeming to close in as Oscar's ultimatum hung in the air like toxic smoke. Clara's mother, Patricia, stepped forward with trembling hands raised in a gesture of peace. "Baby, please," Patricia pleaded, her voice breaking. "She's my daughter. Our daughter now. We can't just." "Our daughter." Oscar's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper that was somehow more terrifying than his shouting. "I never signed up to raise another man's mistake." The words hit Clara like a physical slap. She'd always known Oscar resented her, but hearing him call her a mistake, in front of her own mother, shattered something inside her chest. Patricia gasped, tears streaming down her face. "Don't you dare call her that," Patricia said, finding strength from somewhere deep inside. "Clara is not a mistake. She's my child, and if you can't see how special she is." "Special?" Oscar cut her off with a cruel laugh. "She's special, all right. Specially good at eating our food, using our electricity, taking up space we don't have." He turned his cold stare back to Clara. "You want to know what special gets you? A one-way ticket to the real world." Clara felt something shift inside her, a steel spine replacing the fear that had kept her silent for 3 years. She straightened her shoulders and looked her stepfather directly in the eyes. "Fine," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. "If that's how you really feel, then maybe it's time I found somewhere I'm actually wanted." Oscar's eyes flashed with surprise, then anger. He'd expected tears, begging, maybe her mother's intervention. He hadn't expected defiance from the quiet girl who usually disappeared into the background. "Don't test me, girl," he warned. But Clara had already made her choice. The kitchen erupted into chaos as Patricia stepped between Oscar and Clara, her maternal instincts finally overriding years of walking on eggshells around her volatile husband. Her hands shook, but her voice carried a strength that surprised everyone in the room, including herself. "Over my dead body," Patricia declared, her chin raised in defiance. "You will not throw my child out on the street. Not on her birthday, not ever." Oscar's face contorted with rage, veins bulging in his neck. "Your child? What about my needs, Patricia? What about what I want in my own damn house?" "This is our house," she shot back, "and Clara is part of this family whether you like it or not." But even as she spoke the words, Clara could see the cracks in her mother's resolve. The way Patricia's eyes darted nervously to Oscar's clenched fists, how she instinctively stepped back when he moved closer. 3 years of psychological warfare had worn her mother down to a shadow of the strong woman who'd once raised Clara alone. "Choose," Oscar said quietly, his voice deadly calm. "It's her or me, Patricia. You can't have both." The silence that followed was deafening. Clara watched her mother's face cycle through a dozen emotions: love, fear, desperation, guilt. She saw the exact moment her mother's shoulders sagged in defeat, and Clara's heart broke not from anger, but from understanding. Patricia had chosen survival. She had chosen the man who paid the bills over the daughter who reminded her of dreams she'd given up long ago. "I'm sorry," Patricia whispered, not meeting Clara's eyes. "I'm so sorry." Clara nodded slowly, feeling strangely calm. "I know, Mom. I know." Oscar smiled, victorious. But he had no idea he'd just created his biggest enemy. 2 black garbage bags held everything Clara owned as she stood on the sidewalk outside what had been her home for 3 years. The evening air bit through her thin jacket, and the sounds of the neighborhood, sirens in the distance, music from car radios, children playing despite the late hour, seemed amplified in her shocked state. Patricia had slipped her $47 and a phone number scrawled on a napkin. "Mrs. Henderson from church," she'd whispered quickly while Oscar wasn't looking. "She might help." Now, standing alone with darkness approaching, Clara felt the weight of the real world settling on her shoulders like a lead blanket. She'd heard stories about kids who aged out of the system, about teenagers living on the streets, but she'd never imagined it would be her story. Her phone buzzed, a text from her best friend Beatrice. "Happy birthday, girl. Can't wait to hear about your party." Clara stared at the message, then slowly typed back, "Plans changed. Can I crash at yours tonight?" 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Then appeared again. Finally, "Girl, you know my mama don't play that. What happened?" Before Clara could respond, a police car slowed beside her, the officer inside eyeing her bags with suspicion. She quickly shouldered both bags and started walking, trying to look like she had somewhere to go. The last thing she needed was questions she couldn't answer. As she walked through the familiar streets that now felt foreign and hostile, Clara made herself a promise. She would survive this. She would thrive. And one day, Oscar would regret underestimating the girl he'd thrown away like garbage. The first rule of the streets was simple: trust no one but yourself. Mrs. Henderson's house sat at the end of a quiet street, its small porch illuminated by a yellow bug light that attracted moths in lazy circles. Clara had walked for 2 hours, her arms aching from carrying the garbage bags, before finally gathering the courage to knock on the door. The woman who answered was nothing like Clara had expected. Where she'd imagined a stereotypical church lady with judgmental eyes, Mrs. Henderson was young, maybe 30, with natural hair twisted into locks and paint-stained fingers that suggested an artistic soul. "You must be Patricia's daughter," she said, stepping back to let Clara inside. "I was wondering when you'd show up." The house smelled like sage and something baking in the oven. Clara hesitated in the doorway, bags still clutched in her hands. "My mother said you might." "Honey, put those bags down and come get something to eat." Mrs. Henderson interrupted gently. "We can figure out the rest later." As Clara followed her into the kitchen, she noticed the walls covered with vibrant paintings. City scenes, portraits of black children playing, abstract pieces that seemed to pulse with life. This wasn't just a house, it was a sanctuary. "You're an artist," Clara observed, accepting a plate of cornbread and soup. "I try to be, Mrs. Henderson. Call me Nia," said with a smile. "Art saved my life when I was about your age. Maybe it can do the same for you." "I'm not artistic," Clara said quietly, surprised by the woman's warmth. Nia studied her with intelligent eyes. "We'll see about that. But first, tell me what really happened tonight. And don't give me some watered-down version to protect people who clearly didn't protect you." For the first time since leaving her mother's apartment, Clara felt safe enough to tell the truth. 6 months had passed since that terrible birthday night, and Clara had transformed from a lost teenager into someone driven by purpose. Living with Nia had been like stepping into a different universe, one where dreams weren't laughed at but nurtured, where potential wasn't squandered but cultivated. "Your grades are exceptional," Mr. Thompson, her guidance counselor, said as he reviewed her transcript. "But your attendance record from your old school." He frowned at the file. "That's behind me," Clara said firmly. "What matters is what I do from here." Under Nia's roof, Clara had discovered something she'd never had before: stability. Nia worked as a freelance graphic designer, her small home studio filled with client projects and personal artwork. She'd given Clara a corner of the space and basic art supplies, not pushing but simply making them available. To everyone's surprise, especially Clara's, she had talent. Raw, untrained, but undeniable. Her sketches captured emotion in ways that made Nia catch her breath. Her digital art pieces, learned through online tutorials during long nights, showed a sophisticated understanding of color and composition that usually took years to develop. "I want to apply to art school," Clara announced one evening as they worked side by side in the studio. Nia looked up from her computer screen, excitement sparking in her eyes. "Which ones?" "All of them. The good ones, the expensive ones, the ones people like me aren't supposed to get into." Clara's voice carried a determination that surprised them both. "I want to prove something." "To who?" Clara thought of Oscar's cruel laugh, her mother's defeated shoulders, the neighborhood kids who'd already given up on their dreams. "To everyone who counted me out." Neither of them mentioned the real target of her ambition, but Oscar's voice echoed in both their minds: another man's mistake. 2 years later, Clara stood in the gallery space of the city's most prestigious art institute, surrounded by other scholarship recipients and their families. Her own family consisted of Nia, who beamed with pride while wearing her one good dress, and surprisingly her mother Patricia, who'd driven across town despite Oscar's objections. "I can't believe you got a full ride," Patricia whispered, tears streaming down her face as she hugged her daughter. "I always knew you were special, baby. I always knew." The words stung more than Patricia probably intended. If she'd always known, why hadn't she fought harder that night? But Clara pushed the bitterness away. Today was about moving forward, not looking back. Professor Williams, the department head, approached with a man in an expensive suit. "Clara, I'd like you to meet Jude Radford from Radford and Associates. They're one of the city's top marketing firms." Jude extended his hand, his grip firm and confident. "I've been following your work through Professor Williams. Your digital portfolio is remarkable for someone your age." "Thank you," Clara said, matching his professional demeanor. "I'd like to offer you an internship," Jude continued. "Paid, of course. We believe in investing in talent early." Nia squeezed Clara's shoulder encouragingly, but Patricia looked confused. "Internship? But you just started college." "The best students work while they study, Mom," Clara explained gently. "It's how you build a career." As Jude handed her his business card, Clara felt the first real stirring of the success that would eventually change everything. She didn't know it yet, but Oscar had been watching the local news coverage of the scholarship recipients from his recliner, his expression unreadable as his stepdaughter's face filled the television screen. 4 years had passed since that first internship, and Clara now sat in the corner office of her own marketing consultancy, the city skyline stretching beyond floor-to-ceiling windows. At 24, she was the youngest African-American woman to own a top-tier marketing firm in the city's history, and her client roster read like a who's who of major corporations. Her assistant James knocked on the door. The Forbes interview is in an hour, and Channel 8 wants to reschedule their feature piece. Move Channel 8 to next week, Clara said without looking up from the campaign mock-ups spread across her desk. And make sure the photographer gets my good angle for Forbes. Success had come faster than anyone expected, including Clara herself. Her college portfolio had caught the attention of several major clients during her junior year, leading to freelance contracts that paid more than most people's salaries. By graduation, she had enough capital to start her own firm and enough connections to make it viable. The money was intoxicating, not just having it but what it represented. Every designer handbag, every luxury car payment, every expensive dinner was a middle finger to everyone who'd counted her out. Especially to the man who'd called her worthless. Her phone buzzed with a text from Nia. Saw the Forbes announcement. So proud of you, but don't forget where you came from. Clara smiled, but something in the message made her pause. When was the last time she'd visited Nia? When had she last thought about anything besides profit margins and client acquisition? Before she could dwell on it, James reappeared. There's someone here to see you. Says he's family, but he's not on your list. Clara's blood ran cold. She had a feeling she knew exactly who was waiting in her reception area. Oscar stood in Clara's sleek reception area like a bull in a china shop, his work boots and faded jeans completely out of place among the modern furniture and expensive art pieces. He'd aged in the 8 years since she'd seen him, gray creeping through his hair, lines etched deeper around his eyes, but his posture still carried that same arrogant authority she remembered. Well, he said as Clara emerged from her office, his voice carrying across the space. Look what we have here. Several of her employees had paused their work to stare, sensing drama. Clara's assistant James hovered nearby, clearly ready to call security if needed. Mr. Williams, Clara said coolly, deliberately using his last name instead of acknowledging any family connection. This is unexpected. Mr. Williams? Oscar laughed, but there was something desperate in the sound. That's how you greet the man who raised you. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Clara felt her professional mask threatening to crack, 8 years of buried anger rising to the surface. Raised me? Is that what we're calling it? Oscar glanced around at the watching faces, then back at her office with its expensive furnishings visible through the glass walls. I always knew you had potential. Always believed in you even when times got tough. The audacity was breathtaking. Clara felt her hands clench into fists, her carefully maintained composure beginning to fray. James, please ask everyone to return to their work. And hold my calls. She turned on her heel and walked back into her office, leaving Oscar to follow. She needed privacy for what was about to happen, because 8 years of success hadn't erased the memory of that 16th birthday, and Oscar was about to learn exactly what kind of woman the girl he'd thrown away had become. Oscar settled into the expensive leather chair across from Clara's desk with the casual entitlement of someone who belonged there. He looked around the office with obvious approval, taking in the awards on the walls, the expensive electronics, the view that probably cost more per month than he made in a year. You've done real good for yourself, he said, his tone suggesting he deserved credit for her success. Real good. Your mother's gonna be so proud when I tell her about all this. My mother already knows, Clara said, her voice carefully controlled. She's known about every milestone, every achievement, every step of my journey. The question is, what do you want? Oscar shifted uncomfortably, apparently not expecting such directness. Can't a man visit his daughter without wanting something? His daughter. Clara leaned back in her chair, studying him with the same cold analysis she used on difficult clients. Interesting choice of words from someone who threw me out on the street on my 16th birthday. Now that's not how it happened, Oscar said quickly, his voice taking on a wheedling tone. You were going through a rebellious phase, acting out. We thought some tough love might help you find your way. The revision of history was so blatant, so shameless that Clara almost laughed. Tough love. That's what you call it. And look how it turned out. Oscar gestured broadly at the office around them. You found your strength, made something of yourself. Maybe I was tougher than I needed to be, but it worked, didn't it? Clara stood up slowly, walking to the window that overlooked the city. From this height, the people below looked like ants, scurrying about their business with no idea they were being watched. Tell me, Oscar, When exactly did you start taking credit for raising me? The question caught him off guard, and for a moment his mask slipped. Oscar's confident facade cracked as Clara turned back to face him, her success story suddenly feeling less like validation and more like accusation. The expensive office, the prestigious awards, the media attention. All of it represented everything he'd said she'd never achieve. The newspaper article came out last month, Clara continued, her voice deadly calm. The one about successful local entrepreneurs. My assistant showed me the interview you gave to the community blogger. Oscar's face went pale. He'd forgotten about that interview, done in a moment of drunk bravado at the local bar when someone had mentioned seeing Clara's picture in the business section. You told them you were proud of the young woman you'd helped raise, Clara quoted from memory. That you'd always believed in my potential even when I was going through difficult teenage phases. That good parenting sometimes means making tough decisions. Clara, listen. No, you listen. Her voice cut through his protests like a blade. For 8 years I've built this company with one driving force. Proving wrong every person who said I'd amount to nothing. And the loudest voice in that chorus was yours. Oscar tried to interrupt, but Clara held up a hand, her executive authority filling the room. You want to know what tough love really looks like? She continued. It's an 18-year-old girl working 3 jobs while going to school full-time. It's sleeping on friends' couches and eating ramen for months because rent money went to art supplies. It's fighting for every scholarship, every opportunity, every chance to prove that your worth isn't determined by the people who failed you. The words hit Oscar like physical blows. This wasn't the scared 16-year-old he remembered. This was a woman who'd forged herself in fires he couldn't even imagine. I didn't come here for money, he said weakly. Clara's smile was sharp as glass. Good. Because you're not getting any. The confrontation with Oscar had ended with security escorting him from the building, but not before he'd made one final, desperate plea that revealed his true motivation. Patricia was sick, cancer, and the medical bills were crushing them. He'd swallowed his pride, hoping that blood might be thicker than the water he'd forced under the bridge. Clara sat alone in her office as the sun set over the city, Oscar's words echoing in her mind. Her mother was dying, and the man who'd thrown her away was now begging for the help he'd once said she'd never be able to give. Her phone rang, displaying Nia's number. Clara almost ignored it, then answered on the 4th ring. I heard Oscar showed up at your office, Nia said without preamble. The neighborhood's buzzing about it. News travels fast. Honey, are you okay? Clara looked out at the city lights beginning to twinkle in the growing darkness. He wants money for Mom's treatment. And I don't know if I can separate helping her from enabling him. Clara's voice cracked slightly. He threw me away, Nia. Called me worthless, a mistake, a burden. Now he wants to claim he raised me. He didn't raise you, Nia said firmly. We both know who did that. But Patricia is your mother, and she never stopped loving you, even when she was too afraid to fight for you. As they talked, Clara made a decision that surprised even herself. Success had given her many things, but the most powerful was choice. She could choose forgiveness without forgetting, could choose compassion without compromising her boundaries. The next morning, Clara's lawyers would set up a trust fund for her mother's medical care, one that Oscar could never touch. She would take care of her family, but on her own terms, proving that sometimes the best revenge is showing people exactly what they threw away. Oscar had claimed to raise her, but Clara had raised herself, and she'd done a damn good job.